Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie Beasley, and I'm here with Jim Beasley, my husband, and we are here to talk about artificial intelligence. It is Sunday evening, and we are sitting in what is slowly but surely becoming a podcast YouTube studio.
Yeah, I gotta wonder if it's gonna have a weird echo in here. We've got hardwood floors, we've got
Yeah,
tall ceilings,
I might
so
have to soundproof a little bit.
maybe. Well, we'll have to listen to it and see. This is our first time. We are going to start doing a YouTube video as well, which means we're going to have to actually not just have our sweats on and sitting around in shorts or whatever it is we're doing. We're going
Maybe
to
we can AI generate ourselves.
maybe like an avatar kind of thing.
Yeah.
There you go. So what are we going to do tonight? Well, we're going to talk about three things.
Three things. We have three goals tonight in our 30 minutes that we have, you guys. So, goal number one.
We were talking about recently trying, because we're going to teach a class this summer. We're talking about doing a programming class this summer that specifically is for AI.
Okay.
And we're going to teach high school kids. So you and I have been talking about how to explain to a high school kid what AI is.
So, that's the one thing we're going
That's
to do
one thing.
tonight.
Number two is the news, because we always do that.
Always cover
We've
a
got
little
some news
bit.
articles.
Okay.
Number three is most of the trainings we've done, somebody asks us what to invest in. The question becomes lately, is this a bubble that's going to pop? So we're going to make our attempt at that as well.
Okay.
We've
So
been
let's start
around
with
through a
first.
few bubbles and pops. So
We have.
bubble popping.
We've got some mileage on us. We've been
A little
here for
bit. That's a good way of putting it. We have mileage
a
on
little
us.
bit of mileage. I need an oil change. I can tell you that much right now. Okay.
So
AI. You were explaining this to me earlier. Actually, I think it was this morning before I had my coffee.
yeah, it was pretty early. It wasn't 4:30 though. I waited till almost 6 before we were talking about it.
And you did this to explain artificial intelligence.
So I'm going to give you
it actually made sense.
So I'm going to give you a sentence.
Okay.
And I want you to make the sentence that follows it.
Okay.
I walked home today.
Because I had no gas in my car.
Now, if I give you more context, my car's been acting up. Now, what's the next sentence going to be?
I need to get my car fixed.
I walked home. I walked home because my car broke down. That makes sense now because of the context. Even your first answer, the one you just gave about the gas, was a different guess than you made this morning.
Yeah, this morning I think I said something like it was sunny outside.
Or something. The point is, though, the first time you answer it, you have no context. So really what these large language models
you should have asked me a different sentence.
What these large language models are trying to do is come up with what you want to say. They really want the next word.
Well, no,
not just the next sentence. They wanted that's how they're programmed. That's how the neural nets work. You give them a word or a series of words, which is a sentence, and they try to come up with the next word.
The point I'm trying to make is, since you asked me the same sentence that you asked me this morning, my brain already built context.
Correct.
Which is why I immediately thought about the vehicle having a problem.
Yeah, I noticed you froze
vehicle.
on that. You were trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and so, but it's because I already had that context from this morning. But if you had asked me a totally different question.
I went to a birthday party yesterday.
Because I was invited.
My niece.
I ate cake.
Okay. So what would be more context you would give somebody if you were teaching a kid and you said that and you asked them to make a follow-up sentence? Now, what would be the extra context that would change your sentence?
I went to a birthday party yesterday at a Mr. Gaddy's, maybe.
No, I was at a Mr. Gaddy's. You could just say, if I said I was at a Mr. Gaddy's, that's my next context. Then your sentence could then change to I was at a birthday party yesterday. It could even be because I happened to be at Gaddy's and there was one going on.
Yeah.
The point is that they base what their answers on what they know. They don't do anything else. They're text-based. They're trying to guess the next word. They have to have context. All of what we do with AI is trying to give them that context. Now, if they don't answer the way you expect, it's because you haven't given them context. What's the word people use for that? Hallucination. They go off the reservation. They start doing something completely weird. And you're thinking, okay, what was that? That was them not having context from their initial training, plus you didn't give them any. But once you give them, it narrows that focus down to guessing the next word based on what you just told it.
Which is why prompting is so important.
Prompting is very important, and that's what, when you talk about like Agnes, we built Agnes and we did retrieval augmented generation, which is the short for RAG, is the short for it. We do that because you give it context of all these documents that we've done. Like in our case, it's extension lists and master schedules and all that other stuff for our onboarding tool. We give it all that context at the appropriate time for it to answer the question, to synthesize the answer the person wants. We're going to do some variation of that when we teach the class. We're going to try to limit the class to about 10 people, but we are going to try to teach a class. We'll see if anybody signs up.
I don't know.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see.
So we're going to, now that we've talked a little bit about what AI is, we're going to talk about the news. This is kind of a big deal. It's in AI Business, which is aibusiness.com. And the headline is
the UN, United Nations, adopts first global artificial intelligence rules.
What was interesting about this was that the United States actually is the one that led the resolution. And one of the things they say, which you and I talk about all the time, is to ensure equitable access to AI technologies. You and I talk about that a lot.
The digital divide.
The digital divide, and I don't know if that's what they had in mind, but it's certainly what comes to mind when I read that. Because as this consolidation continues with who has what AI, and the cost, is still expensive, you start wondering who's going to have access to this stuff. Now, the EU, they passed their own AI Act not long ago.
It was a while
ago. Theirs was more about governance, is more about safety and stuff like this. This was really about, keeping people safe, making sure people have access to it. Humanity, they said you want deployed through the lens of humanity, dignity, and safety, security, human rights, fundamental freedoms. That was Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador for the UN.
Now that the UN has done this, you think they did it kind of as a...
It's non-binding.
All right. But it's kind of like a precedence for other countries.
120 countries, 120 other member nations signed on.
Okay.
So a lot of it, of course, people are going to violate some of it, but they tried to keep it generic. Basically, it was an attempt for everybody to at least agree on something when it came to it. So I thought that was interesting. This was something when we were originally talking about this, I had a different article, but I found this one. This is techcrunch.com.
Okay.
And apparently last year in June, they had raised $1.3 billion for Pi, their more personal AI. I've used that. We've told people about it. Inflection makes Pi. And their lead investor was Microsoft. Today, less than a year later, I like the way this guy put this. You'll like this. Less than a year later, Microsoft announced that it was feasting on Inflection's body and sucking the marrow from the bones. Though I think they phrased it differently, the guy said. I'm pretty sure they phrased that differently.
Yeah, no, I don't think they phrased it that way.
But the co-founder, Mustafa
Sounds like
Suleyman,
might be accurate, though.
Yeah, it does, because they not only got the CEO, but the co-founder, but several other people. Basically, they sort of absorbed them. They made a comment recently in the press that if OpenAI went tomorrow, they have all the technology, they have all the intellectual property.
Microsoft does?
Yes, their CEO said that. Now they've got all of Inflections as well. So when you talk about equitable access,
the way they're doing it is not by buying the company out, because then they would start having
they're afraid of the lawsuits
stuff.
The Sherman Antitrust Act on AI kind of stuff.
So they're
because they've already done that before. They got in trouble with that with web browsers. Remember?
Yes. So now they're just hiring the people instead.
Yeah, they're absorbing them, basically and they're getting the intellectual property while they do it, but they're not. The company can still exist, and they'll tell you how they're helping save the company and yada yada yada. My concern is that, as we found out when I was first playing with Agnes and the AI, where it was going to live, Agnes was going to live on Azure because we use Microsoft products. And so we signed up for the free stuff. We got the storage, we got the OpenAI access, all that stuff. And it was all free, was what I was told. And I did nothing that first month with it at all. And they charged us $297. And it took us 3 months to cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was with doing zero access. I didn't store anything on it. I didn't put Agnes on it. We didn't do any inferencing. We did nothing.
And also with you having someone help you who knows a lot about Microsoft
Yes.
and Azure and trying to make absolutely sure that everything you were signing up for was
Was
free for
free or the
education.
lowest cost. That's what concerns me about Microsoft is the cost. That digital divide, we talk about it all the time. It's going to get a lot wider if it's too expensive for people to touch this stuff.
Hmm.
So the next thing we're going to kind of move into is one I thought was funny,
This was a funny one. You came to me the other day and you were a little bit excited because you were going to contact one of our coaching staff
which I've done
because
before,
previously you had sent him a football play
that
that
ChatGPT wrote.
ChatGPT did, and he
Yes.
had looked at it, said it was a little complicated, but it was still a good play.
Yes.
So you were going to really impress him
I
because you were
was.
like, "Hey, there's this new program out called Tactic
It's from
AI,
Google DeepMind.
and it's an AI assistant for football tactics. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you play the game? What do you
And
do?
then
Who
I
do you put
scrolled
in?"
down, and what did I see? That does not look like a football field to me.
Babe, that's a soccer field.
That for us, that's a soccer field. In Europe, that's a football field.
So it is actually Tactic AI is a European country,
It's a
a European
multi-year collaboration with Liverpool
company.
FC to develop a full AI system that advises coaches on corner kicks. Apparently, corner kicks are important.
Oh yeah.
You coach soccer. I'm not sure you actually
Oh my goodness.
coached it.
I coached
Herd ball.
herd ball. It was a bunch of little 4-year olds that I was trying to get them not to pick the flowers in the
I
in the
don't know,
field.
but didn't you coach Jared's team too when he was older? He was a good soccer
He was
player.
a little bit older,
He
but
was a little
no,
bit
it was
older.
still they were still really young.
Yeah, but it was fun. You know, they'd all get in that little bunch in the middle and the ball would pop out and they'd all go around. That was
Yeah,
funny.
it
That
was
it was
fun.
cute. But
But
anyway, I
as you said, if they decided to do this, I mean, football is becoming really popular in
it is becoming popular in Europe.
American football is
So what are they going to call it in Europe? American football?
pigskin ball.
I don't know what they're going to do with it. They're going to call it that weird American game
I don't
because
know.
there's more people in this world that watch soccer than there is that
I
watch
would say
American
tackle
football.
ball, but soccer's pretty
Yeah, they're pretty rough.
pretty rough.
Don't they play rugby over there? That's even worse, I
Yeah,
think.
no, no, it is.
So anyway, I thought that was funny. That boy, I should have scrolled down before I got excited about that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
So we're going to move on a little bit to one of my favorite topics. I really because I used to work in the semiconductor industry and I find it incredibly fascinating. I can go on and on. I was talking to Amy about it the other day, and I told her we could talk for an hour about it. She goes, "Look at the time. I got to go. I've got
I have to go get
to.
my hair
I have
washed.
to go. I don't know what I have to do, but I have to do something else." Anyway, the fact is that semiconductor manufacturers are all looking to get in on this. That panel we were on with Intel, they talked about their neural processing units. You mentioned that Dell has released a laptop recently
With Intel
that it looked like
processor.
it had an Intel NPU built into it.
Mm-hmm.
Company Grog, which I'm fascinated with, they call theirs a language processing unit because, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the whole marketing thing. If you
Yeah,
can't be first, then make up a new
make another
category.
one. Mm-hmm.
So they've got one that's really fascinating. I've signed up to get access to that online, actually. And then, of course, we have all the different people that want to get into it. In this particular case, this is from the Register, and it says Samsung preps inferencing accelerator to take on NVIDIA,
So an accelerator, it's the same. NVIDIA has
which is exact.
the
It's an
accelerator
NPU.
boards.
Well, NVIDIA
They
makes
When you
they
think of
make
accelerators, I always think of the
GPUs.
old accelerator boards that we used to put into computers to make things go faster.
Well, we used to make Mac accelerators. Remember,
Right,
early on
right.
we sold those
But
things.
this is a chip.
Well, it's still the same idea, though. You're correct. A lot of times with those original Mac accelerators, we were putting a math coprocessor in it. Math coprocessors over time became GPUs, which is a graphics processor. Why? GPUs are sold. NVIDIA was, worth half trillion dollars because they were the big provider of gaming boards. Well, AI uses those GPUs as well because AI, a large language model, the way you're training it is on neural nets. It's like a three-dimensional neural net where all the connectivity in it. Well, that's matrix multiplication when you start looking at doing the calculating vectors and all that stuff. It's real numbers. GPUs do that best. So they're selling them because all these AI people need them. The problem is that first they're expensive.
Very.
Second, you have to have a lot of RAM because these language models use a lot of video RAM. Video RAM's expensive. So a lot of people went in on this because NVIDIA's now went from a $500 billion to like a $2 or $3 trillion company almost overnight. and they're putting out more and more of these GPUs. The problem I have with them is they're big and they use a lot of energy. I mean,
They
I've
do use a lot of
they use a lot
energy.
of energy. They put out a lot of heat. I ran a language model. We talk about the inferencing stuff. Like I'm using my little MacBook here. It's got an M2 processor with a neural processing unit in it. It can answer questions running a language model locally, a small one, for about 15 seconds. I ran that on just a regular Intel CPU, i5 CPU with 32 gigs of RAM, lots of RAM. Figured it'd run fast. Took 3 minutes. The fan kicked on my. I thought I had to reboot the machine. I thought I was going to burn my machine up.
Uh-oh.
So these graphics processors are important, but I don't think they should use quite that much energy. I mean, you have to have NVIDIA processors at the rate they're going are going to come with a small little nuclear reactor, so you can run your.
What was it you were telling me about the other day that you said if this person or if this company actually produces what they say they're going to produce, that it's going to change
That was
everything?
that was instead of using that was more like an analog chip than a
Mm-hmm.
digital chip. I can't remember the name of that company, but I told you that they were going to be a great investment if they come through. I can't remember what their name was though.
Well, you'll have to look that up
I need
again
to look that
because it
up
was
again because
really
people always ask me what to invest in. I like to tell them stuff. Anyway, so moving on to the last one, which is in the semiconductor industry. This is from the U.S. Department of Commerce, and
Biden Harris administration announces preliminary terms with Intel to support investment in U.S. semiconductor technology leadership and create tens of thousands of jobs. So apparently, the Biden Harris administration realizes how important this is going to be.
well, the problem we have is from even back whenever I was, in the semiconductor industry more than I am now, everybody was moving all their stuff overseas. The whole infrastructure, we invented the semiconductor industry
And
and
then
then
we
we
gave
shipped
it
it all
away.
overseas. And so, yeah, we gave up a huge advantage we had. Well, the fabs didn't just move, but the whole infrastructure to support the fabs moved. So bringing them back is hard. Well, Intel is one of the few that kept a fab over here, but a lot of what they did, from what I heard, was either smaller scale or Department of Defense stuff. Because
Mhm.
for odd reasons that I can't understand, the Department of Defense doesn't want Chinese companies making the semiconductors they put in, our weapons systems and all that.
Really?
Weird as that may seem.
That is weird. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there was
That's
back
sarcasm.
then everything was around Phoenix, all the manufacture. I think it's still a lot of it is, and I can go into a whole podcast about why that's the case because I used to go to those fabs out there. Nobody cares, but I thought it was cool. Anyway,
Okay. Why?
because of the humidity,
Ah,
you have a choice. You have to control the humidity one way or the other. So the question becomes, is it easier to remove it or add it?
I would think add it.
It's easier to add it in controlled amounts. Well, when you get out in the
Hmm.
desert where it's very, very dry, because dry is bad, by the way. You've touched things and shocked it before. If you touch a semiconductor chip, that's like a lightning bolt hit it. If you shock it like that. So they add humidity to reduce the static electricity in the air, but they
But it
can
has to be
add a
perfect.
controlled amount,
Hmm.
which makes you wonder why it's done so well in Asian companies. See, when you talk about Taiwan, I've been to Taiwan. It's hot and it's humid. They do a lot of fabrication of, so apparently they remove a lot of water from the air. I wonder if they just drain all that water off in the street, or I don't know where all that water goes. I mean, you've seen just our air conditioner here when it gets
Hmm.
humid and all the water
Hmm.
run. They have to do that in order to make these semiconductors because it's the process is very, very
Hmm.
controlled. Anyway,
Okay.
I love the semiconductor industry. It's very fascinating.
And I'm glad that the Biden Harris administration is
I
helping.
do. I hope that it turns out well. I hope we get more fabs over here. We need to move them back here. We need Americans making this stuff. I know, um, I know world commerce is supposed to be important, but I want that stuff made in America.
Well, world commerce is important,
I
but
want us to lead it.
that's the whole
And
thing
when it
right
comes to
there.
semiconductors, I do not think there's a more important industry than semiconductors for us to be the leader in. I think we have to. We should have never left that up. We all these investors that coming in kept pushing it to be cheaper, and they moved it overseas. It was a huge mistake.
Okay.
So hopefully some of that's going to get corrected.
Sounds
So
good.
we got about 10 minutes left. So what are we going to talk about next? The third thing
Is
is
it a
the
bubble?
AI.com. Is this a .com bubble?
Right.
Is it like that? And because we are seasoned, we've been through a few of
We
these.
have some mileage on
We do
us.
have some mileage. We saw stuff back in the 80s when the wall fell and the defense industry took a big hit back in the 80s.
The Cold War.
The Cold War ended.
Hmm.
And when all that happened, the aerospace industry kind of imploded.
Yeah, all the defense contractors were debunked. I
And a
mean,
lot of, they don't really talk about it a lot in the news, but I remember because I was involved in some stuff back then doing that.
hmm
And a lot of these engineers and stuff that got laid off, they become the foundation of the telecom industry and the networking industry that came later around DC, outside of DC, Tyson's Corner. Remember, I went
yes,
up there.
hmm
A lot of those companies started
because of
whenever,
that, because
because
they had people looking for jobs or
and
people
and
starting
they became
their own
startups. They
companies.
became startups. They started their own company.
I'm an engineer. I've lost my job. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to start
or
my own company.
or these business people that were out. Because anyway, so then move forward, and guess what happens? The World Wide Web, we talk about that all the time. It went crazy starting about 1995. The World Wide Web really
hmm
became really big. And what happened? The dot-com bubble, all these dot-com
No,
companies popped up
so much
everywhere,
money.
and the telecom companies got huge, and they started building that infrastructure. Remember WorldCom? Most people don't
Yes.
remember them because they self-destructed. WorldCom and several other companies. We had friends that worked for some of these,
hmm
and they put those billions, hundreds of billions put into this. And then people realized that they didn't have a clear path to make money.
That and a lot of it was what I like to call funny money. It's
Oh,
just like,
it was overhyped. They're dumping money
yeah,
into companies that have no path. People were giving away stuff. I think the Super Bowl in like 1997, 98, somewhere in that time frame, they had like 60 commercials, and almost all of them were paid for by these dot-com companies that don't even exist anymore. So they had a crash, the
a
big
big
crash,
crash.
and slowly but surely. But the companies that went away in the crash didn't have a sustainable model. Some people got caught up in just the backwash. They had a good model, but they didn't have enough cash to sustain the market going
To
down.
ride it out, yeah.
Then we had the big crash again in 2008. That was more of a financial. That was all the funny money going on with people and
That that
their
killed us.
derivatives and all that other stuff.
hmm
We lost a bunch of money then. And but we weren't in derivatives. We just lost a bunch of money because the investment firm that we had was investing in questionable things.
hmm
But anyway, but again, it recovered. So this cycle of boom and bust, is that coming? What is your guess?
Yes, yes, I think it is. I don't know when it's going to happen. I mean, already I'm
The,
starting to see, and you and I talk about this some. It's like the staying power. We are just with our little bitty company, AI Education Professionals.
mhm.
We are small. There's like four of us and our partnerships that we're developing, but we have staying power because we're not putting everything into this company.
Well,
We have our day
we're
jobs,
also not evangelists standing on the roof, and all we're doing is talking about how great it's going to be
right?
or how great it is. We're actually trying to create real value, and
And
we're not
sustainable,
and sustainable value for the people that we're training. We're trying to teach them how to use the core tools
right?
that are coming from Microsoft and OpenAI and Google and all those stuff in a way that actually is helpful. And the next generation of Agnes that I'm building, I'm a lot of these businesses that are going to stay are going to do exactly what I'm doing right now. They're kind of going to go dark with what they're doing because
It takes
it's
time,
work. It
yeah.
takes work to
And
build
you're
this.
almost your one man show.
It takes work to build these things up. You mentioned one man show in small companies. Sam Altman said not long ago in an interview that the first single person $1 billion company will happen in the next 10 years.
$1 billion company that only one person
Only
works
one
at.
person is in the company because of AI. So maybe we're going to be the 4-person $1 billion company.
I don't know if educational AI will get us
Okay. Well,
there.
yeah, it was a thought. It was a thought. Anyway, so my point is that yes, there's going to be the bubble's going to burst at
Yeah.
some point. I don't know if it's going to be this year, next year, or a year after that. But yes, it's overhyped, just like the real estate industry booms and busts. Like the oil. I grew up in a family that did
Oh,
stuff in the oil industry.
Enron and stuff. Yeah.
Well, and the oil industry boom and bust was another thing. I saw it all the time with my family and the people around here that I grew up with. They
Yep.
would go to the
Head
oil
to oil
fields
fields and come back.
and they come back, and you grew up
Head
in
to
East
oil fields
Texas
and
and
come
saw the
back.
same thing.
hmm
So, yes, I think it's going to crater. And I think if you're investing in it now, my advice that I give people, I am not an investment person. I am not rich, which means I'm probably the worst person to listen to. But the big boys right now, the Googles, the Microsoft, especially Microsoft and Adobe, We tell people all the time, Adobe. I don't think Nvidia is going to continue their growth rate because Samsung, Intel, I think
They're
they're
all going
about
to
to have a
catch up.
lot of competition.
Hmm.
So I think theirs a bit overvalued right now from that regard. Maybe they're not. Maybe they've got a lot up their sleeve.
Well, and it depends on what you can afford if you're going to invest.
But Nvidia, of course, Nvidia is investing in a lot more than just AI. For example, they had their conference in Las Vegas this last week, I think it was, and I watched
Humanoid robots.
and those robots, that whole, if you watch it, go into YouTube and watch the keynote from the CEO, and they had all of them on the stage. It almost reminded me of that scene in Iron Man 2 or 3 or whichever one it was when all the robots went crazy and stuff. They didn't go crazy, but they looked a little creepy up there to me. It's a
Mm.
little dystopian looking. But you pointed out
Well,
very
elderly,
recently,
elderly care.
those
The,
robots could be the answer to a problem that
a
really needs
lot of
to be
stuff.
solved.
A lot of stuff. Not just
Simple
we.
things, though.
Well, we are in a situation in the United States where our elderly population is getting older, and a lot
We don't
of
have
them
facilities for them.
we don't have facilities for them. You have a good idea about taking malls and making little, places that you can,
Those closed
those
malls would make
closed
a
in
great place
malls and
for
make little
elderly.
communities for
Yes,
elderly to have like apartments and stuff. We don't have the nursing home facilities. And the people who are starting to get elderly, a lot of them didn't have kids. If they did have kids, that they raised their kids to become professionals,
which means they live in
which
another
they
state
live in another
potentially.
state,
We
another
saw that a lot when we lived
country.
in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, and so they don't have someone that's going to be taking care of them on a day-to-day
It's going to
basis.
go grocery shopping for them,
I
or the ones that are going to run over whenever they
fall
bend over to
down
pick
and
the
they
trash
can't
up and can't get back up.
help. I fall and I can't get up, and
Even if they
it
don't,
happens.
even if they don't hurt themselves, they still have to get off the
Right, and
floor.
they don't have the body
So
strength to
when you
pick them
start
up.
looking at robotics, and as you pointed out to me when I talked about that, if there was just a humanoid robot that could stick a hand out
Stick
and
a
kind of
hand
help
out.
them get
Hmm.
up, because
Stick a hand out. Call 911 if they need to call 911. Just social emotional when it comes to just a conversation. There's that video. If you're listening to this podcast, go find the SNL Alexa
silver, I was going to
Silver
mention that.
video.
That is the funniest thing
It
ever.
is so funny, but it's true.
We've seen it.
These,
We put the
well,
Alexa at my parents'
yes,
house,
and they cannot communicate with it
and they call it Lexi and
and everything else.
Lexar, and
But if they could, it would give them something
and these
to talk
large these
to.
large language models have come a long ways. They're not like Alexa. They have a much wider vocabulary. They have more intelligence. I think that they're. Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm saying in a perfect world, these elderly people would be better taken care of with the richest company in the country in the world. It's shameful how we
It's
don't take care of
horrible.
our elderly people. Our insurance system is the worst, and it's over the last 30 years we've heard lots of promises about how it's going to get fixed, and it hasn't been. So it's shameful that we spend trillions on defense or $1 trillion a year on defense, and we can't help take care of our elderly. But since that's not going to happen, and your people like us are looking for solutions, these humanoid robots may be the solution to keeping people in their homes longer.
Hmm.
Now, loneliness is a problem. I hate to use AI as something they're going to talk to, but I also think AI can be a solution to all these scumbags that are trying to cheat old people out of money.
I agree. Okay, so your brother made a comment to me the other night that, or the other day at work, that his mother-in-law, before she passed, had a device
It was a
that
service. It
it
didn't
was a
call 911.
service.
It called the
It
service
called the service if she needed something. As she got older, she called them every single
to
night
say goodnight.
just to say
And they
goodnight.
liked her because she was
And
a funny lady.
and they would talk to her for 2 or 3 minutes, and how are you doing?
Yes.
That humans crave connection, and it doesn't matter how old you are, you
Yes.
still crave a connection.
We're running out of
So
time.
I know we are.
We could get off a whole
Maybe
evening.
AI could be a
Maybe these
connection.
humanoid robots
Can,
helping
can,
people up and
us,
providing a connection.
even if it's not an actual human connection, it
It's
is
something.
a semblance of a connection. If they don't get it elsewhere, at least they're getting it somewhere.
Exactly.
So we are
Out of time.
out of time. Truly enjoyed the half hour talking about artificial intelligence, and we will be back Sunday evening.
Hopefully doing a YouTube thing too.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see.
So we hope that everyone who is listening has a wonderful rest of the week.